By virtue of the authority entrusted to me, I hereby constitute this assembly as a legal congregation of the University of Pretoria. During this assembly, degrees and diplomas with all the associated rights and privileges will be conferred and awarded on the candidates whose names appear in the program. I would like to request you, ladies and gentlemen, that you join us in a silent prayer or a short meditation to give thanks for the achievement to our students. Thank you. Please take your seats. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a hearty welcome to this autumn graduation ceremony. And this morning, the Faculty of Theology and Religion and the Faculty of Veterinary Science will be conferring and awarding the degrees and diplomas to the candidates. And I wish to welcome the two deans, Professor Pillay and Professor Naidu, and hope that we will have an exciting moment this morning. It therefore gives him great pleasure to officiate at this event where we will be awarding 302 degrees and conferring 57 certificates to all our graduates today. And this will include 23 doctorates, 73 master's degrees, 48 honors degrees, 158 bachelor's, and 19 postgraduate certificates, as well as 38 advanced certificates. In addition to this, we have the privilege this morning to award an honorary degree to the Reverend Dr. Emmanuel Lati, teacher of pastoral theology, care and counseling at the Kendler School of Theology in the United States of America. And Professor Lati, as well as the Person, Community and Religious Life program at Emory Graduate Division of Religion. Ladies and gentlemen, Reverend Lati is an internationally acclaimed scholar who has over many years made significant contributions to intercultural engagement and the concept of African wholeness. It is an honor to have you in our midst, Reverend, and we extend a special word of welcome to you. On behalf of all of us here present, I congratulate every graduate on achieving a veritable milestone, and I'm sure it may at times have been quite a difficult task, which seemed like a very faint speck in the horizon, an insurmountable challenge. But your perseverance and self-discipline and self-respect and self-control has actually yielded the results that we see today. The prominent 20th century Scottish politician, Walter Elliot, I'm told, says perseverance is not a long race. It is many short races, one after another. And those short races you saw as you pass from year to year to year, culminating into this milestone. So I'm sure that each of you this morning present and those that probably graduate in absentia can attest to this assertion. Now, I'd like to quote in in the Bible, because I have to respect that the theology and religion are here. So, and although I don't know much about this, but as a Christian myself, 2 Timothy, loosely translated, says, you have fought the good fight, and you have managed to stay the course, run the race, and cross the finish line. So that's from the Bible. You have fought a good fight. A lot of fighting in the Bible, you know that, from the first, Genesis to the last. Now you have fought a good fight, and you have managed to stay the course, run the race, and cross the finish line. And I'm sure you have kept the faith. This is a great achievement, ladies and gentlemen, in an arena where many fall by the wayside. University studies are quite hard and long. And this is a great achievement indeed to you, and also a tribute to your ability and determination as you have already, distinguished yourself and opened the doors to a brighter future. Now, whilst we celebrate your achievements, it is fitting on this occasion to commend all those who have supported you. In our audience, we have many individuals who have provided academical, financial, and emotional support to you through the course of your studies. And let us thank the specialist academic staff under the leadership of the two deans for everything they have given of themselves, their time, their knowledge, and most importantly, their capacity and love for teaching, coaching, and mentoring. It is only through dedicated corps of outstanding academics that the outcomes being celebrated at this ceremony are made possible. We are also grateful for the contribution of every back office administrative support staff and workers who have made this campus life of the university a rewarding experience for all of us. The administration staff is always hard at work, many hours, preparing your records, ensuring that you are registered, you get your reports, your statements, to ensure that you go to class and get taught well in the appropriate classes, and students, and student leaders and all the people that support you to actually overcome the hurdles, including our staff who work in health and wellness and disabilities units to assist students that require need from time to time. And of course, as we have a number of residencies and all the challenges there are people, there are top-notch student life experiences that you have here, and we ensure that things happen, even with invigilators, those who have been hard at work there to actually secure the integrity of our qualifications by ensuring that these are done seamlessly. Laboratory staff, people that work in our gardens and pavements. You can see University of Pretoria has got a beautiful garden and the grounds. And we wish to thank all of these people and our security services for keeping us awake and protecting our students across the campuses and staff. We are truly indebted to the cleanliness that you have kept this campus, and I wish to thank you, because at this university, everyone matters. And running a university is quite a complex and enormous task, ladies and gentlemen, and your contribution to the success and well-being of our students is very much appreciated by university authorities. And of course, in the absence, we also acknowledge every staff member of the university who has played a part in your achievements at the university, because not everyone could be here, and we also wish to thank them in their absence. And of course, it would not have been possible for you, our graduates here today, to graduate if it was not the unwavering support that you have gotten from all your loved ones. I mean, your family, your friends, your spouses, everyone, your children. They've been there to actually keep you in the balance to do what you are doing. And it is, of course, an honor for us to have you in this audience today, for having come here to support your spouses, your families, your children here who are graduating. And it is quite a special day for all of us, especially them. And I think we owe all the parents and supporters a very good round of applause, gentlemen and ladies. Thank you very much. Cherish all your happy moments. They make a fine cushion for old age. This was a Pulitzer novelist, Tarkington, who says that. Now, ladies and gentlemen, in this pursuit, our Faculty of Veterinary Sciences and the Faculty of Theology and Religion may appear to be two small players in the field. They certainly are small in number, or they look small in number, but their contribution to this university is quite huge. The impact that comes from these two faculties is quite huge, regardless of what appears to be a smaller size of a faculty that we have collapsed into one ceremony today. In fact, they are serious contenders in academia and they make us one of the most significant contributors to our research output and the impact of the university. For students in both of these prestigious faculties, their program selection is a calling more than what a career could be. At present, there are no fewer than 45 NRF-rated researchers. 45 is a high number, including young and up-and-coming researchers in these two faculties, 19 in theology and religion and 26 in veterinary science. Being rated by the NRF bears witness to the quality and impact of the research output. It is certainly no mean feat. And the Faculty of Theology and Religion, which celebrated its centenary last year, is the largest and oldest of its kind in South Africa. So, Dean, you have to convince me now. I used to work at Potchefstroom. They said they were the largest and the oldest. Now, we are also the largest and the oldest. So, at some point, I need to be told which one is which. But I believe it is this one. And with its strong research tradition, it is highly recognized for its scholarly integrity and a high number of papers published in scientific journals every year. The mission of this faculty is to serve the church, the community, and science with a particular devotion to the African context within which we find ourselves and a sensitivity to the concerns of different Christian traditions and faiths. And the Faculty of Veterinary Science, which was established in the 1920s, is unique in that it is the only largest and oldest of its kind, but also the only faculty that trains veterinarians in the whole of South Africa. It goes without saying, therefore, that the faculty has a cardinal role to play in the country and on the continent. And as an internationally recognized platform for veterinary and para-veterinary excellence, the faculty provides an effective veterinary interface in Africa. It also boasts strategic partnerships and research collaborations across Africa, Europe, and the United States, and these are vital in enhancing human and animal health, promoting biosecurity and welfare, and ensuring that our production animals, wildlife, pets, are in good health and are also safe. Ladies and gentlemen, veterinarians produced by this faculty not only serve the community in private, government, or industry involving wildlife and exotic animals, farms and all of these things, but through their research, they also contribute to practical solutions to some of the major challenges faced by the continent. Now, with the graduates of the veterinary science faculty, we hope that we'll be able to continue to make an impact in the physical health and welfare of the animals and in the continent and the world. And similarly with theology and religion, we know that the work that they do sustains many, many lives spiritually and the welfare of people. Now, coming back to you, graduates, it is my sincere hope that your qualification that you will receive today will actually enable you to enter the techie family, and of course you will be able to make us proud as you proceed to make a contribution that is constructive to our society. And we hope that everything else that you have learned here will stand in good state. So we join you we in fact invite you to join the community of proud Techs alumni and to actively plow back into the University of Pretoria and its students. In other words, what I'm saying is, when you start making serious money, don't forget us. May I encourage you to be worthy ambassadors of our illustrious institution. And I hope that, ladies and gentlemen, we will celebrate today, be happy and enjoy the achievements of our students. And we never know how far-reaching something we may think, say, or do today will affect the lives of millions of tomorrow. So what I'm trying to illustrate is that, what you say, what you think, or what you do should have a positive impact in the lives of generations to come so that you can make today matter. It therefore remains for me to thank you all, and I will now request the Dean of the Faculty of Theology to introduce to me the honorary doctorate candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I have the honor to introduce to you Professor Emmanuel Yatekwi Lati for the conferment of the degree Doctor of Divinity honoris causa. The continent of Africa produced several well-known theologians, such as John Mbiti and Kwame Bediako, respectively from the fields of religious studies and systematic theology. However, when it comes to the field of practical theology, the one name from Africa that immediately springs to mind is that of Emmanuel Lati. Currently, Professor Lati is undoubtedly the leading African scholar in the field of practical theology. In his academic work, he takes the local context seriously while participating in a global conversation. He is an international specialist in pastoral care, counseling, and theology in different cultural contexts, and is involved in ongoing research regarding the theological implications and practical effects of pastoral care in a diversity of cultures, and has received international recognition for his work. Professor Lati's contribution, as revealed through his publications, makes the following apparent. Firstly, He takes the continent of Africa seriously, and as a practical theologian, embraces the fact that in Africa, religion is generally not so much about beliefs, dogmas, and creeds, as it is about the performance of faith practices. He also developed a so-called African practical theology in his book titled Post-Colonizing God in 2013, and argues that the African spiritual heritages should be embraced and built upon that and the polyvocal nature of post-colonizing activities in which especially submerged, rejected, and ignored voices are heard, that all should be taken seriously. In his publications on pastoral care and counseling, he developed an intercultural and cross-cultural approach. This approach challenged the dominant Western constructs with regard to pastoral care and offered a new approach that takes cultural differences seriously. Lati's work enabled scholars to look beyond the horizons of their own contextual practices and understandings, both in Africa and in the rest of the world. Emmanuel Lati has held academic positions in England and Ghana and is currently the L. Bevel Jones III Professor of Pastoral Theology, Care and Counseling at Candler School of Theology, Emory University, USA. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the honorary doctorate on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree of Doctor of Divinity, honoris causa, with all the associated rights and privileges on the candidate. To speak over to. Now, I have the honor to request Professor Emmanuel Lati to address the Assembly.
Mr. Vice Principal, Deans of Theology and Veterinary Science, members of the Executive Council, heads of department, faculty, distinguished guests, graduates, family, ladies and gentlemen. I begin by giving honor to God, our Creator, who has made all of this possible. I give honor to our ancestors, upon whose shoulders we all stand, without whose existence we would not be here today. And I give hearty thanks to especially the faculty members of the theology faculty who nominated me for this great honor. And I give hearty thanks for the recognition and the honor done me by this award. It gives me great pleasure to speak to you this morning. And I would like to begin with a quotation from the words of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, son of this land, who, for many of us, truly represents the soul of Africa. These are very familiar words. This is what Archbishop Tutu declared, "Goodness is stronger than evil. Love is stronger than hate. Light is stronger than darkness. Life is stronger than death. Victory is ours through him who loves us." Profoundly true, these words express the fact that is evident in all our experience, that life is indeed a struggle. From the day of our birth until we take our last breath, we are engaged in a struggle for which we must be appropriately armed if we are to succeed. This struggle, though real, is not merely a physical war. In fact, the most significant struggle we are engaged in, the struggle that has the greatest impact and which is most consequential for our lives, is not a physical struggle. It is a spiritual one that takes place inside of us and within our communities. Now, many coaches, sportsmen and women confirm that it is actually the mental state of the athlete that ultimately determines the outcome of the contest. Training and physical preparation are, of course, necessary and, in fact, inevitable in sports. But it is inner qualities, invisible states, dispositions of mind and heart, spiritual qualities, if you please, that are going to make the difference between success and failure on the sports field. And this is evident in the psyching up that sports people do. Boxers psych themselves up. And in fact, I am always interested in observing prior to the contest how the boxers face each other and look each other in the eyes, as if to say that if I have a superior strength of character, then I am going to prevail over you. Now, this happens in other sports as well, and we all know the kinds of things that sports people do in order to ensure their mental state of success. Too many people around us in the world today have been motivated and mobilized into action by negative states of mind. Politicians across the world have played on these negativities to propel themselves into positions of power and influence. The destructive and harmful emotions of hatred, anger, and fear have been the tools that have been harnessed in the struggle for power in too many places. Politicians have shamelessly invoked people's hatred, anger, and fear to garner their support in elections. But these states of mind and heart drag us down to the lowest level and have motivated the most heinous crimes against humanity. When negative states are invoked, destruction and mayhem are inevitably unleashed. We cannot use the same negative forces to overcome negative social realities. Generating more hatred in the attempt to overcome hatred sinks all parties into the quagmire of evil. Martin Luther King Jr. once declared, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." And today I am calling upon us all to disallow such negative, destructive, and harmful states of mind and heart from dragging us down into the gutters and sewers of human life. Today I wish to call upon us all to rise to a higher plane. It is the positive, higher energies alone that can overcome the negative forces of fear, anger, and hatred. The essential message of theology, and indeed of all religions, is a call to all of humanity to rise to the highest potentialities of our human minds and spirits through the adoption of the highest and indeed the most potent spiritual forces available to us. So let us adopt higher energies. Let us not only talk about or conceptualize them, but let us operationalize them, putting them into practice. Goodness, generosity, kindness, and benevolence has the greatest strength in the struggles of life, I suggest. In your struggle to live, you may use the tools of hatred, fear, and anger. You can base your whole life on these negativities, and some people do. But in the end, to really achieve the great success in life that we all need, we need stronger and more positive weapons. And I want to suggest that the strongest emotional and mental weapon available to humanity is love. That which has had the most lasting effect on human well-being is not hatred and death, but rather love and benevolence. And by love, I do not merely mean sentimental or romantic feelings. Love is, in fact, an all-encompassing disposition, attitude, or orientation to life, which has, among others, cognitive, volitional, affective, conative, interpersonal, and communal dimensions. It is love, I suggest, that has kept us going through the challenges of academic, economic, and social lives, and that has brought us to this day of graduation and celebration. It is love that has enabled us to endure the hardships and rigors of study, writing, and engaging the difficulties of understanding and expressing truths, and research, and brought us to this time of graduation. The power of love overcomes all obstacles and difficulties. The energy of love conquers every negative force. Let us harness the spiritual energy of love to propel us to overcome the hatred, fear, and anger that bedevils human society. C.S. Lewis' notable classic on Christian love, entitled The Four Loves, teaches us about the nature and types of love. But I wish to direct our thoughts to four objects or four subjects towards which love may be directed. Christian faith teaches us that the spiritual energy of love needs to be directed at these four objects if it is to be fully unleashed: love of self, love of neighbor, love of community, and love of God. Friends, love of self means that we organize to take care of ourselves through healthy eating, healthy living, healthy drinking, and healthy exercising. Love of self leads us to respect ourselves and to hold ourselves in high esteem, to expect the best of and to challenge ourselves to be the best we can be. Jesus teaches us to love our neighbors as ourselves. And this means that we need to love ourselves with the same kind of love that we have for others. We cannot love our neighbor whilst we engage in self-destructive behavior. So love yourself. Take care of yourself. Respect yourself. Expect the best of yourself and continue to provide for the best. But love your neighbor as well. Loving our neighbors means that we treat the other person just like how we would like to be treated. That means we seek the very best for our neighbors, such as we would seek for ourselves. That we promote our neighbors' healthy living, realizing that our neighbors' well-being is inextricably bound up in our own well-being. Love of community means that we extend the love of self and neighbor to all others in our world. It means that we are not self-absorbed. It means that we are not one-person focused. It means that we care for communities of people near and far, that we recognize that we are not alone in the world, and we work for the well-being of the whole human family. But Jesus includes in all of our interactions with others, even our enemies, those we know hate us, and those we know are afraid or angry with us. The strongest force we have in responding to hatred is not to be sucked and dragged down into the same mire of hatred. Instead, it is to rise with the power of love. The Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain principle, ahimsa, the principle of non-violence to all living things, lifts up this same practice of doing no harm, rather seeking the well-being of all, including all animals. Love overcomes harm and evil. Love is stronger than hate. Finally, love God. You see, God is the very ground and essence of all being. Therefore, love of God means that we are totally committed to the well-being of all being. The love of God is the source, the inspiration, and the motivation that floods our beings with irresistible energy and spiritual force that overcomes all that is evil in our world. Our concern and our love of God is expressed in our interest and our care for all being. And so on this occasion, as we come to receive our accolades and congratulations, I would like to leave you with prayers, one from Nigeria and one from Kenya. The prayer from Nigeria has these words: "We beseech you, O Lord, deliver us from the fear of the unknown future, from the fear of failure, from the fear of poverty, from the fear of bereavement, from the fear of loneliness, from the fear of sickness and pain, from the fear of aging, from the fear of death. Help us by your grace to love and fear only thee. Fill our hearts with cheerful courage and with loving trust." And then from Kenya, "May God free you. May God guard you day and night. May God set you in your right place. May you spread out like the grass of the prairie, spread out like the palm leaves. Continue your walk, and may life be with you. May God place you where God's stars are placed at dawn and at night. And may you spread out like the water of a lake and be numerous like the feet of a millipede." Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you very much, Professor Lati, for that inspiring address, which, of course, can build nations and avert all the wars and all the hatred and animosity that we find this world that God has brought us in. I will now request the Dean of Theology and Religion, Professor Pillay, and supervisors to introduce to me the candidates present whose names appear in the program.
Mr. Vice Principal, the supervisors will now introduce the doctoral candidates.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Alan Bester, who has compiled with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Philosophy with a thesis titled Corporate Chaplaincy, Spirituality and Wellness, a post-foundational practical theological exploration. He has prepared this under my supervision, and in his thesis, the candidate used the methodology of a post-foundational notion of practical theology to explore corporate chaplaincy, workplace spirituality, and employee wellness, as well as their relationship to each other. The method of study was in 3 stages of research and acknowledgement. Firstly, an acknowledgement of the local context, then a process of transversality that included a discussion with the 9 interdisciplinary respondents, and then also a movement beyond the local context. The acknowledgement and discussion affirmed the value of workplace spirituality in employee wellness, and it notes the gap between spirituality and religion in these programs. In recognizing the present difficulty in appointing corporate chaplains in the foreseeable future, alternative forms of developing workplace spirituality were suggested. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you now to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Philosophy with all its associate rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you John Chawarika, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Philosophy with a thesis titled The Identity of Bernard Mzeki in the Formative History of the Anglican Church in Zimbabwe, retracing his life, martyrdom, and influence. In this thesis, the promovendus noted that for many years Mzeki has been celebrated annually since the late 1930s as a martyr in the Anglican Church in Zimbabwe and in the Church of the Province of Central Africa and throughout the Anglican Communion. Mzeki died mysteriously in 1896 during the period of the First Chimurenga in Rhodesia, Zimbabwe. The Church believes that Mzeki died because of his Christian faith. Yet other factors that might have contributed to his death were never critically examined. Further, the Church does not have a process that confers martyrdom, although the contemporary Church has examples of persons that are presumed to have died because of their Christian faith. This study calls for the review of the status of martyrs. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Philosophy with all its associate rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Hermanus Nicolaas Holshausen, who has compiled with the requirements for the degree Philosophy Doctor with the thesis titled Land and Ubuntu as Competing Narratives in Rural South Africa, a Practical Theological Perspective. It was prepared under my supervision. In this thesis, the candidate makes a unique contribution in the field of practical theology, as it represents the perspective of a participatory narrative researcher. He used social constructionism, fictional research writing, and ethnography to understand his own efforts at creating meaning, not only as title holder and custodian of agricultural land, but also as an agent of change, facilitating access to this very land. He created a local and personal narrative as alternative to the dominant narrative around land reform, and then problematized both these narratives through interdisciplinary research. In choosing for a revisionist approach to Ubuntu, he came to a preliminary understanding of Ubuntu as right action. His co-researcher's interpretation of Ubuntu as being reserved only for those one that can trust completely led him to create a share scheme with the writer as landowner and his co-researcher as tenant and business owner. The writer suggests that the relationship between a landowner, his co-workers, and the land could possibly contribute meaningfully to access to land for the marginalized. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you now to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Philosophy with all its associate rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Farai Mutamiri, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Philosophy with a thesis titled A Critical Historical Evaluation of the Anglican Diocese of Harare's Decade of Turmoil, 2002 to 2012, which was completed under my supervision. In this thesis, the promovendus makes a unique contribution to the field of church history and church polity in his analysis of the decade, and came to the conclusion that all challenges and issues investigated hinged on the election process of bishops in the province of Central Africa. The study calls for and recommends a total reconstruction of the electoral systems of the province of Central Africa, to adopt a new system which is in line with current practices in other provinces of the Anglican Communion. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Philosophy with all its associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Mr. Hilton Robert Scott, who has complied with requirements for the degree Doctor of Philosophy with a thesis titled Praying, Believing and Being Church, a Ritual Liturgical Exploration, prepared under the supervision of Professor Cas Weppener and with myself as co-supervisor. In his thesis, the promovendus investigated how the form and content of prayer impacts the ways in which people connect with God and other people. Using qualitative research as his main methodological approach, and by taking an interdisciplinary approach to theories from the fields of liturgical studies, ritual studies, and ecclesiology, the promovendus concluded by suggesting a new theory of praxis for liturgical inculturation that includes focusing on the concepts of unity and inclusivity in a multicultural context of being church. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Philosophy with all its associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Blessing Shimbara, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Philosophy, with a thesis titled Towards a Theology of Reconstruction for Post-Colonial Zimbabwe, a Missiological Perspective, prepared under my supervision. In his thesis, the promovendus explored the relevance of missiological models for reconstruction for post-colonial Zimbabwe. In his research, he utilized African Renaissance as theoretical framework informed by social construction theory to construct pretensions from which post-colonial socio-economic and theological challenges can be tackled in Zimbabwe. The value of research lies in the fact that the church in Zimbabwe is provided with a model upon which she should concern herself with the issues of justice, human dignity, equality, and rebuilding of society for peaceful coexistence. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree of Doctor of Philosophy with all its associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Meneer die visierektor, ek stel Gert Jacobus Petrus Johannes van der Merwe aan die voor, wat voldoen het aan die vereistes vir die graad PhD in praktiese teologie met 'n proefskrif getiteld Rituele en Geloofsvorming in die skoolkonteks, 'n prakties teologiese verkenning, voorberei onder my promotorskap. In sy proefskrif maak die promovendus gebruik van 'n interdissiplinêre literatuurstudie met 'n klem op ontwikkelingssielkunde en liturgiese en rituele studies, as ook verskeie fases van kwalitatiewe empiriese praktyknavorsing. Die oogmerk was om spesifieke liturgiese aspekte te identifiseer wat 'n invloed op kinders se geloofsvorming uitoefen. Deelnemers aan die praktyknavorsing het hulle belewennisse en perspektiewe van liturgiese rituele gedeel, waardeur die navorser dieper insig kon verkry in die unieke wêreld van liturgiese rituele in die skoolkonteks. Dit het gelei tot die ontwikkeling van 'n praksisteorie wat in soortgelyke kontekste behulpsaam kan wees om nuwe liturgiese rituele te ontwikkel en bestaande liturgiese rituele aan te pas om geloofsvorming beter te fasiliteer. Meneer die visierektor, ek versoek u om die graad aan die kandidaat toe te ken.
Hiermee kan ek die graad filosofie dokter toe aan die kandidaat met al die regte en voorregte daar verbonde.
Mr. Vice Principal, the following candidates have complied with all the requirements for the degree Master of Theology. Specialization in dogmatics and Christian ethics, Sibun Kim. Specialization in Science of Religion and Missiology, Cornelius Lindeque. Specialization in New Testament Studies, Anushka Lottery, with distinction. Specialization in Old Testament Studies, Lerato Makwena, with distinction. Specialization in Practical Theology, Franz Freeman. Chwenet Setwaba, Practical Theology. Nicholas Smith, with distinction. Give me that. Master of Art in Theology, Vianney Zepper. Specialization in Youth Ministry, Johan Scholes. Specialization in Old Testament Studies, Pokiso Machlabane. Leonie Johnson. James October. Herbert Imbele. Peter Mashlabane. Sylvia Musasizwa. Master of Divinity, Stian Blom. Peter Grissel. Christoffel Jacobs. Philippus Rudolf van Jens van Rensberg. Albert Jordan. Ninke Kem. Marco Koch, with distinction. Johannes Kuhn. Christian Mulder. Charlotte Sibagnoni, with distinction. Hendrik Small. Willem Smith, with distinction. Annika van der Merwe, with distinction. Lawrence van de Venter. Natalie Ann van der Venter, with distinction. Paul van Jaarsveld. Lana van Rensberg. Master of Philosophy in Applied Theology, Malitsane Mashabane. Frank Mawape, with distinction. Natasha Noyan with distinction. Susan Ramashuva. David Fenter with distinction. Johannes Wagner. Mr. Vice Principal, the following candidates have complied with all the requirements for the postgraduate diploma. Specialization in theology and ministry, Kamel Castleton. Christian Oberholzer with distinction. Elizabeth Sharp with distinction. Nadine van Eden with distinction. Skalk Zastron with distinction. Mr. Vice Chancellor, the following candidates have met all the requirements for the degree of Bachelor of Theology Honours. Specialization in Dogmatics and Christian Ethics. Ketani Madzi. Machlehegi Matsepe. Miso Pakela. Specialization in Science of Religion and Missiology, Joan Ferreira, with distinction. Daniel Mall. Specialization in Church History and Church Polity, Clochler Mashakwela. Didn't give you? With distinction, I should have said there. Njoko Nkulukele, with distinction. Yeah, I didn't give him a copy. Ishmael Para, with distinction. Specialization in Old Testament studies, Seppo Abrams. Baron Cilliers with distinction. You don't have a card? Yeah, just give it to me. What is your name? Mashini Dichaba. He's on the list. Specialization in practical theology, Nandi Fleming, with distinction. Ramangali Kanye. Chiyembe Keso Diwewe. Chumisa Makalima. Macha McKenna with distinction. Sandila Imzi with distinction. Kanalang Umslolo. Gift Mokwena. Keka Motsitswe Moleme. Daniel Mall. It's a different wall, yeah. I was going to say what? Felicity Monsitsi. Was it with distinction? Tulani Morajane. Michael Motlahame with distinction. Patandwa Nangalasala. Samuel Ngwambe. Elvis Sibia. Eric Similane. Specialization in Theological Studies, Mpoko Bakitsa. Bachelor of Arts in Theology, Fokase Fokase. Tristan Hartley with distinction. Elsa Kukamo. Tetiboho Matuba Tuba. Mosimange Kape Menlo. Meno. Leave it here. That's it. Filani Mkiza. Kenalemang Kombezekwa. Nampat. It's got fans here. Napatswane and Pobane. Letabo Malapane. Is it Rebecca Rivas. Chen Yong Yo with distinction. Master of Theology, Marie Berg. Annelies Klute. Frederick Kutsia. Claudia de Jong with distinction. Thomas Dreyer with distinction. Jan-Marie de Toit with distinction. Anna Els. Frederick Krobler with distinction. Mone Jacobs. Jana Klut. Rekina Koch with distinction. Chante Leroux. Sia Bulelela Lungana. Andra Meyer with distinction. John Lowe Moton. Lune Polly. Peter Pretorius, met off. Natasha Smith with distinction. James Stridham. Larissa Stridham. Marie-Louise Trollope. Danielle van der Merwe. The following graduates have complied with the requirements for the University Diploma in Theology. Refilo Baloy. Lisa Olshausen. Specialization in Dogmatics and Christian Ethics, Nomsa Guni Motsoko. Mr. Vice Principal, I have the honor to introduce you to Ms. Rekina Cecilia Koch for the presentation of the award of the Vice Principal and Principal. Rekina Cecilia Koch complied with all the requirements for the Bachelor of Theology degree on 30th November 2017, and the degree was conferred on her today with distinction. She distinguished herself during 2017 as the overall top achiever in the Faculty of Theology. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to present the candidate with the award of the Vice Chancellor and Principal.
I hereby present Cock Regina Cecilia with the award of the Vice Principal and Principal. I now request the Dean and Supervisors, the Faculty of Veterinary Science, to introduce to me the candidates present whose names appear in the program.
Mr. Vice Principal, the Supervisors will now introduce the doctoral candidates.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Gabriel Olubumifasami, who has complied with the requirement for the degree Doctor of Philosophy with a thesis entitled Epidemiological Modeling for the Control of Highly Pathogenic Avian Influenza, H5N1, in parts of Egypt and Nigeria. In his thesis, the candidate evaluated the epidemiological situation of avian influenza in parts of Africa. H5N1 is endemic in Egypt and persistent in Nigeria, with significant socio-economic and food security impacts. Implementing improved control strategies and eradication protocol demands an understanding of the epidemiology and associated risks in Africa. Continent data were reviewed for morbidity mortality between 2003 and 2015. Poultry mean morbidity and mortality were 48% and 40% respectively, with variations among countries due to delayed time to report infection. The human case fatality rate was 62% globally, with Egypt having the highest rate. Biosecurity is a control eradication tool, but compliance in the live bird market was suspect. Using a 68-item checklist, risk and protective factors were identified by the candidate. It was found that most LBM complied poorly. Nigerian H5N1 risk map were created using a multi-criteria decision analysis tool, and potential future hotspots were predicted. H5N1 can be prevented or controlled through cost-effective surveillance and targeted pictorial enlightenment campaign. Using computational fluid dynamics, market-level risk of zoonosis to human was evaluated, and it was found that closed-sided markets present the highest risk of zoonosis to human. Finally, using a recombinant vector vaccine, we can prevent outbreaks in poultry and control the spread of H5N1. Participatory epidemiology and a multidisciplinary approach are recommended. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Philosophy with all its rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Emma Weberg, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Philosophy with a thesis titled Validation of a Point-of-Care Clinical Chemistry Analyzer generation of clinical chemistry reference intervals, and evaluation of serum protein electrophoresis in the southern white rhinoceros, Ceratotherium simum, prepared under my supervision and with Professor Steenkamp as co-supervisor. In her thesis, the promovenda aimed to validate a point-of-care analyzer for white rhinoceros and evaluate analyzer performance in the field, generate clinical chemistry reference intervals for the species for the point-of-care analyzer and the Cobas Integra wet chemistry analyzer, generate serum protein electrophoresis reference intervals for the species, and evaluate changes in protein fractions in injured animals. Method and quality control validation of the point-of-care analyzer and generation of reference intervals were carried out according to international guidelines. The point-of-care analyzer was validated for 12 analytes and field performance was deemed acceptable. Serum protein electrophoresis revealed a lower albumin-globulin ratio than other species and 6 globulin fractions were identified. Injured animals tended to have hyperproteinemia, hyperalbuminemia, and a lack of acute phase response. The high globulin concentrations are unique to the species, and it was concluded that wounded rhinoceros may benefit from nutritional protein supplementation. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Philosophy with all its associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Zama Tubeka Happiness Kumalu, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Philosophy with a thesis titled Anaplasma centrale in South Africa, Occurrence, Phylogeny and Genetic Diversity, prepared under my supervision and with Dr. Nicola Collins and Professor Kelly Brighton as co-supervisors. Bovine anaplasmosis is one of the most important diseases of ruminants worldwide. It causes significant economic losses in the livestock industry, particularly in tropical and subtropical areas, including South Africa. In a thesis, the promovenda developed a novel genetic tool and used it to show that wildlife and cattle are infected with Anaplasma centrale strains that are different from the vaccine strain, which suggested a natural Anaplasma centrale infection cycle. The study furthermore contributed in resolving the confusion that has existed in the taxonomic status of A. centrale by inferring phylogenetic relationships. She provided sufficient evidence to classify A. centrale as a separate species and provided a formal species description. Lastly, a study shed light on the possible tick vectors responsible for transmitting A. centrale in South Africa. Overall, her study has contributed significantly to anaplasma research in South Africa and further afield. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
Thank you. I hereby confer the degree of Doctor of Philosophy for all its associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce you Angelica Lewitz, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Philosophy with a thesis title, Molecular Characterization and Host Specificity of Canine Distemper Virus in Selected Wild Carnivores of South Africa, prepared under my supervision and with Professors Desiree Dalton and Emily Mitchell as co-supervisors. Canine distemper virus is a multi-host pathogen infecting and causing mass mortalities in a wide range of carnivore species. Angelica investigated both the genetic characteristics of the virus as well as the host receptors influencing susceptibility to infection. Until recently, canine distemper virus research in South Africa focused only on infections in domestic dogs, with information on wildlife infections greatly lacking. This study resulted in the first report on genetic evidence of the virus isolated in clinical samples from various wildlife species in South Africa, including the publication of the first genomic sequence of the virus in South Africa. The study also provides evidence of a possible role of toll-like receptors in the differential outcome of infection. This research gives a good indication of the diversity and prevalence of canine distemper virus in South Africa and allows a better understanding of the mechanisms involved in host immunity and therefore susceptibility towards infection. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Philosophy with all its associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Emily Phyllis Mitchell, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Philosophy with a thesis titled Pathogenesis of Renal Disease in Captive Cheetahs, prepared under the supervision of Professor Lawrence and with Professor Brzezinski as co-supervisor. In her thesis, the promovenda investigated the role of diet, stress, age, and concurrent disease on gastrointestinal tract and renal disease in captive cheetah. Cheetahs without gastritis or renal disease that were fed a commercial cat diet took longer to develop gastritis and renal disease than those fed a supplementary meat-based diet, but diet did not affect gastritis severity. Adrenal gland morphology positively correlated with disease burden, gastritis, and myocardial fibrosis, but not with renal disease. Age significantly affected both adrenal morphology and disease prevalence. Amyloidosis was closely correlated with age and nephritis. Renal disease was primarily due to fibrosis, although all cheetahs had a combination of renal lesions at death. Oxalate nephrosis in cheetahs was not caused primarily by ethylene glycol toxicity, nor was it secondary to renal, hepatic, or gastrointestinal tract disease. A multifactorial pathogenesis, including a primary genetic predisposition, diet, altered gut microbiome, and or stress is suspected. The prevention of or minimization of stress in captive cheetahs may therefore be a key management tool. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidates.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Philosophy with all associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Katlego Elena Motlatlego, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Philosophy with a thesis titled The Antimicrobial Activity and Safety of Two Newtonia Species with Potential Antidiarrheal Effect, prepared under my supervision and with Professor Kobus Elof and Dr. Muna Abdullah Mohammed as co-supervisors. In her thesis, the promovenda investigated two Newtonia species for activity against pathogens implicated in causing diarrhea, following detection of good antimicrobial activity and low cytotoxicity in extracts of Newtonia hildebrantii, an active compound, myrocitrin, was isolated from the species for the first time using bioassay-guided fractionation. This compound and the plant extracts had good antioxidant and anti-inflammatory activity, which are useful supportive effects in combating diarrhea. The test substances also had excellent anti-biofilm inhibitory activity, and as biofilm formation is implicated in development of drug resistance, this is a promising area of future research. Viruses also cause diarrhea, and myrocitrin was effective in a co-penetration combined experiment acting against viral attachment and entry stages. Ms. Motlatlejo currently has 1 paper published and several more in advanced stages of preparation. She has presented results of her research at 2 international and 3 national conferences. She also received a prestigious NRF SCARE-Skills PhD scholarship. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer. I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Philosophy with all its associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Daniel Nenene Kekwana, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Philosophy with a thesis titled Epidemiology and Antimicrobial Resistance of Staphylococcus Species, isolated from clinical canine cases presented at Onderstepoort Veterinary Hospital, prepared under the supervision of Professor Udoy and with Professor Sitole and Ugutu as co-supervisors. In his thesis, the promovendus evaluated records of 1,497 clinical canine samples. Cochrane-Armitage trend tests were used to assess temporal trends of antimicrobial resistance. Multinomial and ordinary logistic models were used to assess predictors of Staphylococcus infections and antimicrobial resistance, respectively. Spatial scan statistics were used to identify geographic hotspots of infection and antimicrobial resistance. 27% of the samples tested positive for Staphylococcus species. There was a significant increasing temporal trend in the risk of Staphylococcus pseudointermedius. Ear canal and skin specimens were more likely to test positive. Overall, the level of antimicrobial resistance was high, but multi-drug resistance was lower. Over the study period, Staphylococcus aureus isolates exhibited increasing levels of antimicrobial resistance to enrofloxacin, while Staphylococcus pseudointermedius isolates showed similar patterns to trimethoprim, sulfamethoxazole, clindamycin, and orbifloxacin. The promovendus concluded that a holistic antimicrobial stewardship program must be developed to address the growing antimicrobial resistance problem. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Philosophy with all its associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Matilda Shah de Westcott, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Philosophy with a thesis entitled Genetic Origin of Phenotypic Changes in African Horse Sickness. In her thesis, the difference between the genomes
of various strains of the African horse sickness virus in terms of plaque size and genomes were determined, and the most likely responsible genes were identified. It was found that only segment 2 had nucleotide substitutions between all strains of the different serotypes of the virus, through the exclusion of all other segments, was therefore responsible for the large plaque phenotype. Furthermore, a potential mechanism of transcriptional regulation of the individual segments through the formation of hairpin loops in the untranslated regions of these segments was identified. The data generated in this study will be used to improve on the next generation of African horse sickness vaccines. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Philosophy with all its associated rights and privileges of the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce you to Nonthabeko Tema, who has complied with all the requirements for the degree Doctor of Philosophy, with a thesis titled Identification and Characterization of Adlichia ruminantium epitopes as Vaccine Candidates, prepared under my supervision and with Marina van Kleef as co-supervisor. It is known that pathogen proteins may contain epitopes which inhibit protective immune responses or induce immunopathology. These negative effects can be avoided if T-cell epitopes that specifically stimulate cell-mediated immunity are identified for use in recombinant vaccines. The promovendus therefore identified and characterized E. ruminantium-specific epitopes that induces distinctive cell-mediated immune profile. Optimum peptide combinations were induced in 4 multi-epitope vaccine constructs, and these were tested in sheep. For the first time, 60% of sheep immunized with one of these constructs survived against the experimental tick challenge. The protective efficacy of the construct was also enhanced by co-administration of adjuvant. This thesis therefore provides an important contribution to the field of E. ruminantium recombinant vaccine development. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree to the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Philosophy with all its associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I would like to introduce to you Dr. Elise van Vollenhoven, who has complied with all the requirements for the degree of philosophy with a thesis called Monitoring Physiological Indicators of Stress during transrectal palpation of the reproductive tract in mares, used for practical training of veterinary students. This thesis was prepared under my co-supervision and the supervision of Professor Patrick Page and the co-supervision of Professor Ganswind. In her thesis, the promovenda evaluated the potential stress experienced by mares during palpation by means of heart rate variability and endocrine stress-related indicators. The technique evaluation and standardization confirmed that care should be taken when interpreting the HRV results, due to the influence of the correction factors on the HRV indicators. In addition, the repeatability and reliability of the HRV measures
may differ depending on the environment, that is restricted versus unrestricted movement. Although endocrine stress-related indicators did not indicate an overall stress response, heart rate variability was able to identify short-term variations in the autonomic cardiac control during transrectal palpation. Furthermore, the most significant results towards sympathetic components were recorded during the first 5 minutes of palpation and again at 65 minutes post-palpation. The co-activation of the sympathetic and the parasympathetic branches in the initial stages of palpation may be due to and be attributed to recognition, that is the prediction of outcome of the procedure. In summary, the 20-minute palpation period restricted to one student was tolerated well by the mayors accustomed to the procedure, but the stress response after prolonged restricted movement was pronounced. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Philosophy with all its associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Ms. Tanya Wolf, who has complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Philosophy with a thesis titled Impact of Social and Ethological Variability on the Endocrine Pattern in Free-Ranging Male Giraffe, prepared under my supervision and with Professor Bennett and Dr. Boris as co-supervisors. In her thesis, Tanya used a non-invasive approach to monitor fecal androgen and glucocorticoid metabolite levels from fresh feces in free-ranging giraffe bulls to look at reproductive function and responses to stresses. Patterns of hormone metabolite alterations in relation to observed male behavior were revealed and examined. Furthermore, social network analysis were performed to study changes of group composition and to compare differences in sex-related grouping patterns. The data confirmed that giraffes function in a highly flexible social system and that males and females show different association patterns and related endocrine correlates, which vary with season, presumably in relation with the reproductive status of the cows. As the flexible social environment influences the endocrine milieu of giraffe bulls, these findings should be considered when managing these iconic species in the future. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Philosophy with all its associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, I introduce to you Gareth Edwards-Ilo, who's complied with the requirements for the degree Doctor of Philosophy with a thesis titled Practicality of Using Impala as a Research Model, prepared under my supervision. There is little scientific knowledge related to the safe capture and anesthesia and management of African antelope. To ensure that these animals survive and are treated in the most ethical and humane way, much needed research is required. In his thesis, the promovendus evaluated some of the physiological effects of various drug combinations used to immobilize and anesthetize impala and the factors that place free-ranging impala at risk of injury or death when captured and placed into captivity under intense research conditions. He found unique undescribed risks caused by anesthesia and documented the Boma management process used to successfully house these animals. He revealed that impala are indeed a good model for the capture and anesthesia of African antelope, but they need to be managed with care. His findings have been eloquently documented in 5 peer-reviewed publications in leading veterinary journals. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you confer the degree on the candidate.
I hereby confer the degree Doctor of Philosophy with all its associated rights and privileges on the candidate.
Mr. Vice Principal, the following candidates have complied with all the requirements for the degree Masters of Veterinary Medicine, with speciality in anesthesiology, Roxanne Buck. In small animal medicine, Zandri Whitehead. In pathology, Trini Jansa van Rensburg. In wildlife diseases, Jenny Hewlett. Master of Science in Animal Human Ecosystem Health, Mogovoyo John Mogovoyo with distinction. In Tropical Animal Health, Anna Smith with distinction. In Veterinary Epidemiology, Danica van der Merwe. In Veterinary Science, Ibrahim Hassan. Andreas Henson. Eleanor Klein. Mago Mampa. Samuel Ogondara. Isabella Salas Martins with distinction. Mario Smuts with distinction. Daniel van Lochenberg with distinction. Mr. Vice Principal, the following candidates have complied with all the requirements for the degree Bachelor of Veterinary Science Honours, Marinelle Breitenbach. Megan Brown. Sumari Dancer. Kelly Duprea with distinction. Luzanne Gilliland. Sarah Hupner. Jacobus Viljoen. Mr. Vice Principal, the following candidates have complied with all the requirements for the degree Bachelor of Veterinary Science: Trent Alexander, Jurgens Bernard, Tracy Beckley, Jessica Burkow, Jade Berman, Sumari Biermer, Ziandri Buertzes with distinction, Brink Buerter, Colin Buerter with distinction, Tashnika Bromdev, Morally Brunt with distinction, Magdalis Berger, John Burgess with distinction, Luke Chambers with distinction, Jenny Chen with distinction, Deborah Chetty, Michelle Kutsia with distinction, Taylor Kutsia, Lucinda Cowan, Dominic Davenport, with distinction. Christine Davis. Sanam Daya. Marika Dikoff. Karina DeSibio. Tiffany Dunster. Anine Duplessis. Hester Dutoy. Anel Duval, with distinction. Daniel Erasmus, with distinction. Johan Erling. Annemarie Hebhardt, with distinction. Magresha Hasuku. Nicole Havenga. Inka Helm. Jade Hilton, with distinction. Elsa Hollenbach, with distinction. Devin Haysamer. Martinus Jacobs. Johan Jordan. Marlies Jordan. Peter Kivet. Alicia Kokomor. Jana Kruger. Gemma Kiesel. Tiens Loubscher. Esmeralda Lawrence, with distinction. Ashley Lemon. Angelique Lessing with distinction. Jade Limbert with distinction. Amy McIntyre with distinction. Jessica McKenzie. Bernadine Milan. Myra Murray. Hunley Marks. Bevan Mayer with distinction. Jason Mayer. Kweniso Makachwa. Makola Makulo. Fatima Mula. Jade Malt with distinction. Asiki Insani. Nadine Nagel. Anna Nietling. Zunisani Ngobeni. Jessica Ninaba. Mukani Nobela. Fransoni Noki. Sivuhile Ntambankulu. Christine Papadopoulos. Kirsten Perlin. Eben Pfeiffer with distinction. Andre Pretorius. Graham Pickett with distinction. Sunay Pretorius. Cameron Pryor. Tabitha Pryor. Ravona Ramnanan. Madhuri Riada. Anuska Rickson. Vanessa Salisbury. Gusti Schutter. Erin Siri. Luda Shika. Shanae Stoffberg. Esti Stolf with distinction. Melissa Susans with distinction. Sarah Joy Taylor. Nompumelelo Temba. Maria Ace with distinction. Mateus Ace with distinction. Alisna van den Berg with distinction. Sean van der Herk. Chantel van der Lingen. Courtney van der Merwe with distinction. Liana van der Westhuizen with distinction. Klaas Jan van der Wetteren. Liesel van Graan with distinction. Linka van Heerden. Melissa van Heerden. Ivan van Wyk. Anke Venter. Kelly Yu with distinction. Mr. Vice Principal, the following candidates have complied with all the requirements for the University Diploma in Veterinary Nursing. Louise Allen. Nicole Basil. Sasha Bentley. Catherine Boswell. Nadia Buerta. Anasita Brucha. Emerentia Cilliers. Anne-Marie Coutier. Elizabeth Coutier. Anita de Weert with distinction. Simone Duploy. Zenani Gondwe. Timishang Homo. Anma Kurt. Angama Mangaliso. Basatsana Mpala. Tenswalo Mashile. Esti Mellet with distinction. Wazile Mshlaba. Yanaka Olafir. Mary Lou Potkita. Maria Simon. Taryn Skierpers. Ntombi Zetu Makwanazi. Lizelle Skoen. Patricia Sufunda. Lone Smith. Estian Talyard. Jessica Taylor with distinction. Mr. Vice Principal, I have the honor to introduce to you Graham Pickett for the presentation of the award of the Vice Chancellor and Principal. Graham Pickett complied with all the requirements for the Bachelor of Veterinary Science degree on 23 November 2017, and the degree was conferred on him today with distinction. He distinguished himself during 2017 as the overall top achiever in the Faculty of Veterinary Science. Mr. Vice Principal, I request you to present the candidate with the award of the Vice Chancellor and Principal.
Award to our Vice and Principal. Ladies and gentlemen, let us give our graduates a big hand for their work and perseverance over the many years. I would also like to request our graduates today to applaud their families, friends, and spouses for the support they have been given over the many years. Thank you very much. It is indeed a joyous occasion. Even those who are not graduates, I see they are very happy. They clap. Thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our proceedings this morning. And before we close, I wish to invite all of you for refreshments outside. There's a marquee tent outside the hall here for light refreshments. And I would now also request to stand for the singing of the national anthem and remain standing until the assembly has been dissolved and the academic procession has left the auditorium. The words of the national anthem are printed on the inside back cover. By virtue of the authority entrusted to me, I now dissolve this Assembly of the University of Pretoria. Thank you.
Gambia!